to close, obviously, I thought Albert did a great job, and you can read it on si.com. Just kind of some final thoughts on the passing of Colts owner Jim Irsay, and I'll say it like this, and I think you did a good job, Albert, of encapsulating this. When an owner and when an NFL owner passes, it's kind of like when a senator passes, and there's this really big, gigantic feeling to it for a lot of people in the league. But then there's also, the fans and I think the media. They're like, "Well, this guy did this and this guy did that." I think that what Jim Irsay did that I think was valuable and is worth remembering. All of his support for mental health awareness, all of his support for his players. He's had some players with some high profile instances of mental health, and those players have come out and talked about mental health. We're closing out Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think that regardless of what you want to put the totality, like, we're all complicated figures. We're all complex people with good things and bad things about us. But I think that's one thing that's worth kind of taking away from Jim. I thought that his push to make people feel a little bit more okay in their own skin was something that I admired personally. And yeah, it's he's one of these. He was a very unique figure in the whole landscape of professional football.
Yeah, so I told the story of like a local radio show I do up here, and I've done up here for 15 years, and it was actually like kind of funny. I don't know if you've heard the draft call between Quentin Nelson, Jim Irsay before. Like where he goes, "Hey Quentin, what's up, man?" Like, and so that draft call actually kind of launched them turning this into a bit where they would kind of poke fun at Jim, over the year. And they would always ask me like, "Hey," like, and I had a friendly relationship with Jim, and I wasn't super close to him, but I had a friendly relationship with him. And like, they always asked me like, "Hey, do you think Jim would come on?" I'm like, I actually think he sort of would. And then he was doing an event up in Boston. It was the Jim Irsay collection event where he puts his guitars on display, and then he and his band would play a set. So they did that at TD Garden. So when the radio guys found out like he's doing a show in Boston, they said like, "Do you think he would come on to promote this?" So I said, "Yeah." And so Jim went on, and you can find it on you can go back and you can find it. It was Toucher and Rich from 2023. He went on for an hour with them and told all these incredible stories about just like fear and loathing type stories from his experience with celebrities and everything else. And then they struck up a rapport. And so he wound up inviting those guys to be backstage and then at his show in that July at TD Garden, and then brought them out on the stage during the show. And I think it was a good example. Like the reason I told that story there was because it was a good example of like how like they sort of like had been poking fun at Jim for a while, and then like they got to know him. It's like I really like this guy, and I think a lot of people had that experience with him where it's like he's quirky and weird and different, but then once you get around him, it's like he's such a good-hearted guy. And I think the people who have worked for him, players, coaches, front office, you see some of the outpouring now. Peyton Manning, Tony Dungy. I communicated with a couple of guys, front office guys last night who worked with him. I can read something here from one of them where he said, his passion for his family, organization, and team was truly unmatched. Always got everything, anything you ever needed, he would be there for you. Tons of great memories. Said his mantra was "good is the enemy of great." Like, so he always wanted his team to be the best he could, but he did that by supporting the guys in the building and giving them all the resources that he could. And, I think the overriding thing is, even when he did stuff that like looked really bad in retrospect, football wise, like, firing Frank Reich to go to Jeff Saturday.
Right.
I think what the people who worked for him would tell you is his heart was always, always, always unendingly in the right place. You know what I mean? Like, and it was always about trying to do the right thing for his team. And when he made mistakes, he was willing to fall on the sword for him. Like after the Saturday thing, he ran probably the most extensive coach search I've ever seen. Right. And a lot of people thought that it was like this ruse to just go back and hire Jeff Saturday.
Right.
And it wasn't, because he was listening to the people around him. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, because he was willing to admit his mistakes. And there are lots of owners across sports that can't do that, And so, I just think, for all of his demons and and his trouble, and he certainly, there was some hard living in there for sure.
No doubt.
Like, this was a guy who I think was deep down a genuinely good person who wanted to do right by all the people around him. And I think, in the coming days, and I don't know when the services are going to be, but I'm assuming that's going to be soon. In the coming days and weeks, I think you're going to hear lots of stories from the people who worked for him, who were around him, and obviously his family too, on just the type of person he was and how that shone through, in everything that he did professionally.
No doubt. Well said. And our thoughts go out to the Colts family, obviously, and all of
Yeah,
the
his 3
former
daughters, his
players.
10
And
grandchildren. Yeah.
yeah,
And you know what's amazing about too, Connor? Just one other thing is I I think even though he had his problems, like he changed perception of his last name. Like, if you go back like 30 years to the mid 90s, and like I remember my dad like we would always refer to the Colts as Baltimore. He couldn't kick that. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, he always referred to them as Baltimore.
yeah.
And like, what that Irsay name was known for then was the Mayflower trucks leaving Maryland. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Like, that's what, and this guy and his dad, who was not well liked. You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of people had issues with him and everything else. And that name, that Irsay name, was seen in a very negative light. And I think Jim changed perception of his family and his last name. And that's pretty incredible. You know what I mean? Like, and like, no one thinks of them as the Baltimore Colts anymore. They're the Indianapolis Colts. And a lot of kids, that state's always been huge basketball state. Now a lot of the best athletes in that state play football.
Yeah.
And yes, part of that is luck and being bad in the right year, so you get Peyton Manning. But he hired Bill Polian. He hired Jim Mora. He hired Tony Dungy when,
Right.
like, he looked at it and said, like, we've sort of run our course with Jim Morris. So he did a lot of things right. And I think because of that, he established a real identity for the franchise in Indianapolis, and he completely flipped perception of what that last name means.
Here's one stat that I'm sure he would appreciate, because it was actually, I think what was so stunning about this was he was posting about the Pacers kind of hours before he passed, which again shows some of the commitment that he had to team in the local area and everything like that. Last night, obviously, the Pacers absolutely stunned the Knicks in the first round of the Eastern Conference Finals. Since 1997, teams that have trailed by 7+ in the final 50 seconds of the fourth quarter or overtime in the playoffs are a combined 4 and 1,702. 3 of those 4 teams, Albert, are the Pacers in this playoffs.
Wow.
How insane is that?
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah.
Freaking believable.
I mean, that game too. I mean, like, that's one of those things in that city where it's just like, kind of, it makes you think like someone's smiling down. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Maybe that's someone's Jim Irsay, like on what happened last night. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's, he had a huge impact in that city. And, we even think about things like, and I know we're going on here, Connor, but like, think about like the idea that there could be a Super Bowl in Indianapolis, and it was a great Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, I think we all had an awesome week that week. And then, how I think all of us, like, I feel like everyone in the media has carried the flag for do not move the combine out of Indianapolis, and so much of that happens because of the Colts' place in that city and their ability to build that new stadium and keep the team there. And what is a middling market size wise, it's, it's really cool. Like, when you think about like the big picture impact that he's had on that city. And, certainly you think about a lot of the people in that city. The shock, I think, it kind of came out of nowhere for all of us, the news last night, and then it being followed up by, what happened at Madison Square Garden was pretty cool.